spiritually thinking and has developed his spiritual knowledge and spiritual wisdom in the necessary form. Therefore, I have to conceal many things, unfortunately, also from you. A spirit world, as you call this, does not exist. They are only the fine material worlds in this regard. These are worlds that lie in other dimensions and accommodate disembodied spirit forms. When a spirit leaves a material body, it can't just settle down anywhere, it must inhabit a body again, or it goes into a fine material world, a world of spirit forms, of which there are countless ones. There, the spirit lives as its own form for so long, until it returns again into a newly created host body. Billy says, aha, that is to say that a person won't always have the same material body and the same personality, if I understand correctly, for you just said a newly created body. Semyaza says, right. That is, each spirit form normally has a dwelling body that is specifically tailored to it, in which it lives out its life in a material form. Over an entire main period, it can be tracked that the facial features of the host body aren't always alike and, thus, that they change very noticeably. This applies until a high spiritual state is reached. Not with very low but rather with very high spiritual states do the faces of all host bodies of the various spirit beings begin to resemble each other. Once a host body has died, the spirit escapes from it and normally enters a fine material world. Even there, it has to live through certain periods again, before it can take up a host body once more. But if a host body is destroyed prematurely, by force and by any circumstances, before it becomes animated by the spirit on the 21st day, then it may happen that the spirit in question doesn't seek another host body as soon as possible and doesn't inhabit this, but that it continues to linger in the realm of the other world. Thus, it won't penetrate into bodies that are already occupied. Therefore, this won't have as a consequence that two spirits live in a single host body and cause serious confusion. Herein, there are, therefore, no possibilities. This, then, is the normal process, by which the spirit goes back into the fine material world and, in turn, spends a further period of learning there. Translator's note: one should note that the above sentences, which are numbered 191 through 200, give very different information from that which is contained in the corresponding sentences that are numbered 178 through 185 in Message from the Pleiades Volume 1. I am rather confident that the translation in Message from the Pleiades Volume 1 doesn't represent an accurate translation of the most current German version of this section of the contact report. Billy says that approximately coincides with my conceptions, though not very precisely. But how about this? Can we enter into any connections with a spirit being's comprehensive consciousness block in a fine material world? Semyaza says sure, but that isn't recommended. The comprehensive consciousness blocks, which enter into fine material worlds like the spirit forms themselves, are no further along in their knowledge than they were in their material lives. Thus, they still own falsehood and lies and deliberate deception. Therefore, those who are materially alive shouldn't want to get in touch with them because they could be leaked to in large measures. It would be better for those who are living to increase their knowledge through their own consciousness work than to want to acquire it in this way, because they would often only be misguided. Of course, they are also comprehensive consciousness blocks that could respond in a sincere attitude. However, those are few, and they live in higher spheres because they are further developed in consciousness. On the whole, however, there are few people who can enter into connection, as you say, with the deceased. Although you have large spiritualistic circles on earth, these are often nothing more than deception. Many mediums are just very good actors and indulge in the desires of their theatrical drives. A fact that, unfortunately, can only be proven by earth people with great difficulty. But on the other hand, they are also those mediums who imagine tremendous things and then imitate these entranced states in all perfection, by what means deception takes place again. Moreover, their imagination often goes so far that they can name actual things of other people from the past or the future and even imitate their voices in all perfection. But also not to be forgotten are those mediums who are exploited by any beings of other dimensions maliciously or just for fun. There are actually only very few real mediums, and mostly, they are almost unheard of. But the fact that they are real mediums, they are silent over this and make no fuss about it. Billy says, so then, I haven't been mistaken. But now, what about the tape recorder voices? Semyaza says here, many points play together. Most cases of tape recorder voices are to be attributed quite clearly to the radio that is well known to you, whereby often so-called radio amateurs play their jokes. But on the other hand, many of these contacts occur by means of communication of space travelers. However, the thoughts of people also play an important role and often push themselves out as audible voices, and indeed, not just on tape recorders but freely audibly. Often, such a person who directs a question to a tape recorder unconsciously imitates a voice, which is somehow congenial to him, in his thoughts, and directly transfers the answer, which he wants to have or hear, to the tape recorder. Billy says, but how is that possible? Semyaza says, if I had to explain that to you, then it would be extremely complicated and lengthy. I can tell you, however, that every receiver is also a transmitter and can catch the highest thought vibrations and transmit them into a receiver. Billy says, so then, tape recorder voices wouldn't be phenomena of another dimension or spirit world? Semyaza says that isn't entirely correct, because just as there are genuine mediums who are able to enter into connection with other dimensions, they are also genuine tape recorder voices that really come from comprehensive consciousness blocks of different fine material worlds. However, there are just as few of these as genuine mediums. Also in this area, unfortunately, a lot of deception and charlatanism are pursued, which is to be attributed to the renowned obsession, etc. of human beings. The electronic voice phenomena known on Earth are usually based on calling up the memory bank Akashic records and are worthless and meaningless, while the genuine recordings are kept secret. Billy says, thanks, Semyaza. You've really helped me a great deal. Semyaza says, for today, it must also be enough, for duty calls me again. I'm sorry to tell you, however, that I can't come for the next 24 days because I must undertake a long journey to don't mention the place, please, because a certain task is incumbent upon me, which one has laid on me. Billy says, too bad, Semyaza. But then, may I still ask you one or two questions, since I won't see you for so long? Semyaza says, sure. Just ask, there's still enough time for that. Billy says, thanks. So far, you've never told me where you actually always stay, when you're not carrying on conversations with me. May you give me information about this? Semyaza says, in part, I can enlighten you about that, that is, I may tell you everything, but you may not disclose everything. We have our bases on Earth, as well as on many other planets, where we stay continually. We also have such a base in this country, Switzerland. It is located high up in the mountains there, I have my main whereabouts when I'm on the Earth. In addition, we still have some other major stations that are distributed all over the world. However, they are all built so securely that it would be impossible to find them when one doesn't know them exactly. Moreover, I also travel a lot and have to fulfill my duties on various worlds. I also often go on visits to the homeland, as you tend to say, and thus, I also often stay in the Pleiades, as we tentatively call it. Billy says, can we talk about it later in more detail? Semyaza says, of course, only, a lot will be intended for your ears only. Billy says, nevertheless, I am curious. To be sure, the time will become somewhat long for me. Semyaza says, I'll remain with you in thought connection. Billy says, that's at least a comfort, but can you still explain to me what the so-called spirit music is all about? Semyaza says, spirit music. What's that? Billy says it's always maintained that certain people would receive musical pieces transmitted from the beyond.